In the quiet little town of Rio Verde, a sinister legend hovered over the serene waters of the river that ran through the region. It was the legend of the Weeping One, a supernatural entity that, according to local residents, wandered the banks at night, sobbing and crying out for her lost children. The story said that Weeping was a mother who, in an act of madness and despair, drowned her own children in the dark waters of the river after being abandoned by her husband. Since then, her spirit haunted the place, looking for children to replace those she had lost. While some inhabitants treated the legend with skepticism, many others firmly believed in its veracity, especially after reported sightings of the woman in white robes, wandering the night with a melancholy wail. The legend of the Weeping Woman was passed down from generation to generation, a story that served both as a warning for disobedient children and as a source of chills for adults. However, few dared to venture near the river after dark, fearing they would encounter Weeping Woman herself. Despite the scary stories, life in small Rio Verde continued its course, with the residents leading a peaceful and familiar existence. But, like all legends, the story of the Weeping One hid secrets and mysteries that waited to be revealed. And, for a certain inhabitant of Rio Verde, these secrets would become more real than he could ever imagine. The protagonist of this story is Carlos, a local resident of Rio Verde and single father of two young children, Sofia and Miguel. Carlos was a reserved man, still recovering from the loss of his wife, Maria, who had tragically died in an accident on the banks of the river, close to where the Weeping One was supposedly seen. Since then, Carlos has tried to keep his family together, while dealing with grief and the challenge of raising his children alone. However, stories about La Chorona began to haunt Carlos, bringing back painful memories of the accident that took his wife's life. He tried to dispel fears, convincing himself that the legend was just a local superstition. But as strange events began to occur in his home and around the river, Carlos found himself increasingly disturbed by the possibility that the legend was real and that his family was in danger. The main conflict arises when Carlos is faced with the difficult decision of protecting his children by keeping them away from the river and scary stories, or facing his own fears to discover the truth behind the supernatural events plaguing his city. While dealing with his own emotions and past traumas, Carlos finds himself forced to take steps to ensure his family's safety, even if it means confronting a supernatural entity he always believed was just a legend. As the night progresses, supernatural manifestations begin to intensify around Carlos and his family. Sounds of crying echo through the house during the early hours of the morning, waking Carlos and his children with a shiver down their spines. Sofia and Miguel begin reporting sightings of a woman in white on the banks of the river, an ethereal figure who appears to be watching them from afar. Carlos tries to discredit his children's experiences, attributing the sounds and sights to the children's fertile imagination. However, he himself begins to feel a sinister presence around the house, as if he is being watched by invisible eyes. The nights become increasingly unsettling, with Carlos struggling to maintain his composure in the face of mounting evidence that something beyond the natural is happening in Rio Verde. Inexplicable events continue to unfold, objects that move on their own, shadows that seem to dance on the walls, and an inexplicable feeling of cold that permeates the air. Even during the day, the atmosphere in the city seems charged with a dark and oppressive energy, as if the Weeping One's own presence is getting closer and closer. Carlos is forced to face the reality that the legend of La Chorona may be more than just a scary story. He needs to find answers to protect his family, even if it means confronting his own fears and facing the unknown on the banks of the river he fears so much. Determined to discover the truth behind the supernatural events that haunt Rio Verde, Carlos begins his investigation into the legend of La Chorona. He spends hours in the town's library, scouring old books and historical records for clues about the origin of the legend and any connection to his own personal history. During his research, Carlos discovers ancient reports of encounters with the Weeping One, dating back centuries. The stories describe frightening encounters with the ghostly figure, all centered around the banks of the river where his family's tragedy occurred. Carlos realizes that his own story is intertwined with the legend of the Weeping One in a way he had never imagined. In addition to historical reports, Carlos also comes across rumors and gossip among the city's oldest residents. Some speak of ancient rituals performed by the river to appease the Weeping One's wrath, while others mention the existence of magical artifacts and objects that may have the power to banish the supernatural entity. As he dives deeper into the investigation, Carlos discovers surprising connections between his own family and the Weeping legend. He finds records that suggest his wife, Maria, was researching the story of the legend before her death, raising questions about what she may have discovered and whether it is related to what is happening now. As the pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place, Carlos realizes that there is much more at stake than he could have ever imagined. The truth behind the Weeping legend is more complex and disturbing than he could have predicted, and he finds himself faced with a difficult choice: give up his search for the truth and try to protect his family, or continue his investigation even if it means lead you to face danger head-on. With the truth about the legend of Chorona finally revealed, Carlos finds himself faced with a crucial decision. He knows he needs to confront the supernatural entity to protect his family and end the curse that has haunted Rio Verde for centuries. Gathering his courage, he prepares for the final confrontation. One night, when the full moon shines brightly over the dark waters of the river, Carlos takes his children to the place where it all began. Armed with the knowledge he has gained and unwavering determination, he faces the Weeping One, challenging her to reveal her secrets and accept her defeat. The figure of the Weeping One emerges from the shadows, her wail echoing through the night as she slowly approaches. Carlos stands firm, remembering the ancient words of protection he discovered during his investigation. He recites the incantations in a firm, clear voice, defying the supernatural entity with his determination. The battle that follows is epic, with Carlos fighting the Weeping One with all her strength. He uses every device and spell he has learned, every word of power he has found in the ancient records, to weaken the entity and banish its presence once and for all. The confrontation is intense and exhausting, but Carlos refuses to give up. He faces the Weeping One with bravery and determination, protecting his children and his family with every fiber of his being. And finally, after an arduous fight full of sacrifices, the Weeping One is defeated, dissipating into the shadows of the night. With Chorona banned, Rio Verde finally finds peace. The curse that has plagued the city for so long is broken, and Carlos and his family can finally move forward without fear of the past. They know that the battle may have been won, but that the price of victory was high. Yet they are united, stronger than ever, ready to face any challenge the future may bring. With Chorona finally defeated and the curse on Rio Verde dispelled, Carlos and his family find themselves in a moment of tranquility and relief. They celebrate their victory, being thankful for being together and safe after the challenging journey they faced. However, despite the apparent peace, Carlos knows that the battle against the supernatural may not be over. He recognizes that there are other threats besides the Weeping One that may still exist in the shadows, waiting for their opportunity to emerge and haunt the city once again. Determined to guarantee the safety of Rio Verde, Carlos commits to continue his vigilance against evil. He knows he now has the knowledge and courage to face any challenge that comes his way, and he is determined to protect his family and his city at any cost. Together with his children, Carlos begins to work to rebuild and strengthen the Rio Verde community. They get involved in local projects, helping to revitalize the city and strengthen ties between residents. Carlos also shares his experiences with others, educating them about the supernatural threats they may face and encouraging them to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, the legend of the Chorona continues to echo on the banks of the river, reminding the residents of Rio Verde of the battle that was fought and the courage it took to win it. But despite the challenges they have faced, Carlos and his family know they are ready to face whatever the future holds, united in their determination to protect their home and those they love.